responding to me. I was going, okay, so welcome tonight, everyone. I'm reading the chats, and so there we go. Welcome, ladies. I'll go back to this, and you all can tell us about yourselves, please.
I'm Robin Levine-Wissing, and I live out in Seattle, Washington. I've been teaching way too long, and I need to learn to say no. Ever since I retired, I've been doing interim administrator and teaching positions, and I accepted a teaching position for a few months this fall to help somebody out. And teaching virtually is very, 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 very difficult. So we're getting by. I've been an AP reader and table leader since 2000. I do the AP workshops. I also currently teach statistics online for UC Riverside Extension. And I'm just happy to be here tonight to share.
Thanks, Robin.
I'm Tracy Watson. I'm in Arkansas, where it is raining like crazy right now. Beautiful weather for the next couple days from the latest hurricane Beta. So I have been teaching for a really long time, but the one thing that I've done the whole time besides teaching lots of different classes has been a T-Cubed instructor using technology in my classroom. For the past 6-7 years, I've been teaching high school, and my favorite class is AP Statistics. I absolutely love it. And I got the privilege of being a reader the past 2 years. So I'm happy tonight to be here with Robin.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you both for being here. As we continue, if you want to send something out in the chat, please use the drop down and send it to everyone. You might have been with us previously when it said all participants in that chat panel. Please be sure that it says everyone, not all attendees, not all panelists, but everyone. If you lose audio or if you can't hear me or the others, let us know in chat. And if it appears that it's just something on your end of things, test your audio using some of the console options, audio broadcast, or perhaps at the top of your WebEx.
Okay, so we've introduced ourselves, and Ruth, we're very happy to have you here to moderate for us. I'm going to go quickly through 2 activities that I've done and then one that we're going to do together. And all of these activities were done in my classroom all through the school year to really help students with strategies for multiple choice and writing good solutions in the free response part. And of course, we never know what's on the exam, so we can't teach the test, but we can give the kids great strategies. So these are my 3 favorites that have been tried and true all the years that I have taught AP Stats. And these are the 3 that I consistently got really good feedback from students on how it helped.
And with Ruth will change the slide. There we go. Our expected outcomes tonight. I'm really hoping that when you leave tonight, you can say these 3 statements. I can see the benefit of having students discuss all answer choices for multiple choice questions. I can see the benefit of all students working together to present a solution to a free response question. And I can understand the value of students reflecting on the student samples to gain an understanding of a grading rubric. Because after working with Robin, I definitely can say all 3 of these I can statements.
Okay, are we ready to go? All right. And thank you, Tracy, for saying that. Okay, it's taking a second to load. All right, so we've called this Engaging Students in Contextual Writing for AP Statistics Exams, and away we go. And my slide is not advancing. And hold on.
We love technology.
There we go. All right. Well, and I'm not used to WebEx, so. All right, so the first activity, and I'm just going to describe this, and if you have any questions, you certainly can email me. This is basically to help students with multiple choice practice. And it's something that usually takes 15 to 20 minutes. It could take more, it just depends. So sometimes I would do this on a shortened schedule day or when I had extra time in a block class. The number of questions that you give is the same as number of groups in your class. So if you have 8 groups in your class, then you need to prepare 8 multiple choice questions ahead of time. They can be 8 questions from the same chapter or unit that you're working on currently. They can be things from previous units, which helps the spiral review go. And all the students will work on 8 questions, all 8, but the reason why you have the 8 groups is coming up. So that's that. I usually try to give these every 4 to 6 weeks. The kids do enjoy it, and obviously with students, you don't want, if they really like it, you don't want to do it too often because then it's going to lose the excitement. It teaches students really to understand why the incorrect choices are incorrect. So they hopefully do not make the same error again, which occurs when all we give is the correct choice and they have no idea why the others were incorrect. And so we go over multiple choice with students all the time, and they just want to know what the right answer is, and that's great, but they have no idea why they might have chosen the incorrect one. So the way this works is you hand out the problems. They're in groups of 4 or 3, however you have your classroom set, and they're working on the problems, and 8 multiple choice problems shouldn't take them that long. And then you walk around and you'll say to one group, you're going to do question 1, and the next group's going to do question 2, and the next group's going to do question 3 until all of them are assigned. And what they're going to now do, you give them a minute, minute and a half to decide on the incorrect choices and why they were incorrect. So if you have 5 choices, we know that one's correct. And so each student in the group is going to prepare something that will maybe take 15 seconds on explaining why the incorrect choice was incorrect. So examples of that would be, let's say they were had to calculate a confidence interval, and the 5 choices were different setups for the confidence interval equation. So one student may have the choice where maybe the sample size is incorrect or the critical value is incorrect, something like that. And so you give them about a minute, 90 seconds for each of them to pick, again, which incorrect choice they're going to take. And then you pull the class together and you call on group 1, and each student stands up and says why the incorrect choice was incorrect. Now, obviously, there's a little method to my madness here. When I'm going around the room choosing which group's going to pick which, I need to make sure that the group I'm picking chose the correct answer, so the 4 they're going to prepare are the incorrect answers. All right, so moving along. The next one is the class quiz. And my students love, love, love this. And, I'm going to come back 1 second and say that the multiple choice practice, the class quiz, and the test prep thing we're going to do today would be excellent activities for you to do when you're being observed by your supervisor, because these 3 activities have high level of student engagement and, just might be something nice for a supervisor to see what you're doing in the classroom when the kids are doing the work. So the class quiz, again, I do it about every 4 to 6 weeks, takes about 20 to 25 minutes. Do it all through the year. You want to choose a past AP free response question that has at least 4 parts. So you might have to look at some of the old ones. And some of the old ones are actually pretty good for this because the older questions are not necessarily as integrated as the newer ones. And if you're trying to hone in on one specific topic, then you probably will need to look at some of the older problems. Students work in their groups on the problem, and the teacher walks around to monitor but doesn't give the solution. So the way it works is every group gets the same problem, and they're going to work on this AP problem for a little while. And then after they've worked on it for a bit, I'll choose one group to put part A up on the board and one group to put up part B, and et cetera. So you're having maybe 4 groups up the board. One group's doing A, one's doing B, one's doing C, one's doing D. The other kids that are still at tables cannot help. And for example, if you have 8 groups, so you've got 4 groups up there putting solutions, they all sit down, and now the other 4 groups, you select each group to go up, and they may make corrections. So one group goes up to make any corrections on part A, another group goes up to make any corrections on part B, another group goes up to make any on C and D, and the kids in the audience can't help. And there have been times where groups have changed correct solutions to incorrect solutions, but that's just how it goes. When that's all done, then if you maybe have a group that didn't write a solution, they could get, like if you have 9 groups in your room, maybe that last group gets one more sweep through to check any of the solutions that are up on the board. And then what you do is you grade it like an AP problem. So you're up there and you're going through parts A, B, C, asking the kids, do you think this is partially correct, incorrect, the same way that we would grade an AP problem. And then you have a score. So it's a 4, 3, 2, 1, and whatever the score is, they all get. So it's a little quiz out of 4 points. It's a great form of formative assessment. As I said, the kids really enjoy it. And if a student's absent, I don't worry so much about the 4 points they've missed because I do it so often and I do total points in my class that it's not that big of a deal. But if you have a few kids that maybe missed because they maybe were on a field trip, you could always pull them together to work on the problem during a study hall or before or after school or however you do make up work or maybe not count it. All right, so now we're going to get to the actual activity we're going to work on. And I just saw a question that says, does it take 20 minutes with going over everything? Yeah, 20 to 25 minutes. I think the first couple of times you do it, it might take a little longer until they really understand what they're doing. And I try to impress upon them, we're not going to have a half hour to write this. And so, they've worked on the problem for 5, 8, 9 minutes. And then I walk around to the groups and say, you're going to work on part A, you're going to put up B, C, so then they can turn their attention to those parts to finish it, and so on. So it might take a little longer. Again, it depends on your kids, and they'll get better at it as time goes on. So that was a really good question. Thank you. Okay, test prep reflection. So long before FRAPI came out, some of you know FRAPI, free response AP problems, yay, that's been in some of the books. I've been doing this actually since maybe 2 or 3 years after I started teaching AP statistics. And I wanted to find a way for students to really think about writing good solutions and not being fixated on the rubric. Because, we first start teaching where I was showing the kids the rubrics or showing the kids solutions, and they're just copying it down and not even thinking about what they wrote. So this activity, they never, ever see the rubric or the solution, okay? So it's called test prep reflection. They will work collaboratively in groups of 3 or 4. And again, if you have some kids who are going to miss this day because maybe they're on a field trip, I would always ask ahead of time for students to let me know if they're on a field trip or they're going to be out. I could always pull a group together to come before school or after school and work on it because it really is an important activity. It does foster a lot of good discussions among students, and it simulates the actual AP reading situation where as AP readers, we're always discussing the rubrics, sometimes not always agreeing with them, but that's not the point. We have to follow the rubric. So this is a nice activity for them. Students are not focused on the rubric, but they're focused on what is required to write correctly. So here's how it works. Some of us give chapter review problems out like 2 class periods before a test. And so let's say, for example, you see the kids every single day. I know this year is very, very, very different. Okay, this year is very different. Maybe if you're on Zoom, they can go in breakout rooms and work on this. But let's say you see your kids every day. I would give this out Wednesday night's homework with the rest of the review, and it's due Thursday, test Friday. If you're on a block situation where you see the kids Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this would go out with Monday's homework, due Wednesday. You'd work on this Wednesday in class, test is Friday, okay? And this is going to take a chunk of time from the review, so maybe 25, 30 minutes, but well worth it. The first time I do it, after the first chapter, I walk them through the whole thing. So I do it before every chapter test or unit test, however often you give a test, okay? They're going to, basically, without a rubric, it will be very easy for them to pick out the best solution in the packet that they're going to get from their own papers, so they'll even be able to score their own. And the students are going to actually write requirements for a rubric, okay? So they can't just write down, well, they have to have the right answer. They have to write specifically what are they going to do. All right, so here's how this is going to work. We had put in, I think it was in some of the advertising. Tracy, do you want to explain that part about the question?
Yeah, so in our description of the webinar, we wanted you to hopefully pre-look at this frequently free response question from 2005. If you didn't, we're just going to briefly share it with you. You may have used this already in your classroom before. But basically, I'm not going to read the beginning stem of the question, because even just looking at the stem plot, the back-to-back stem plot, it's displaying the number of calories of food consumed per kilogram of body weight for each student on that day. And so that's the data that they're given. And so we've got three parts to this question, an A, B, and a C. On the screen right now, I just have A and B. Do you want me to read the questions now, Robin?
Sure.
Okay. So for part A, what the students are supposed to do is first write a few sentences comparing the distributions of the daily caloric intake of ninth grade students in the rural high school with the distribution of the daily caloric intake of ninth grade students in the urban high school. And then after that, they're asked, is it reasonable to generalize the findings of this study to all rural and urban ninth grade students in the United States? And explain. So I know you're thinking about these two questions in your head and what you would say. And then part C is...
I'm moving.
The researchers want to conduct a similar study, and they have two plans developed. So plan one is having each student in the study record all the food he or she consumed in a day. Then the researchers would compute the number of calories of food consumed per kilogram of body weight for each student for that day. Plan two is having each student in the study record all the food he or she consumed over the same 7-day period. Then researchers would compare the average daily number of calories of food consumed per kilogram of body weight for each student during that 7-day period. Assuming that the students kept good records, big assumption, but it's assumption, which plan, one or two, would meet the goal of the study? And then they want the students to justify, of course.
Okay, some of you just saw me leave my seat. I had to close the blinds. The sun is blaring out here in Seattle. It's just, there's good sun out here.
I have your rain tonight.
I did see a question come up in the chat very briefly. I can't see the chat with me sharing the screen, so I kind of see it very quickly. Are students creating the rubrics? They're not really creating a rubric. Just if you want to hang on, you'll see what the students will wind up creating in a couple of minutes. Tracy, was there any other questions that you think I should answer?
No, there was a question from earlier, but I had already answered it. So
okay, great.
I'll probably come back around to it later. But
okay, so again, here's the parts A and B, writing a few sentences, comparing. And I'm going to talk about Part A in a little while and why this type of part, when they have to compare, comes up often on the AP exams, and students are losing valuable points for like one little silly thing. Okay, so you think we're ready to move on, Tracy?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, So the test prep reflection worksheet, and Tracy, you want to just talk about the packet real fast, how they get that?
Yeah, at the end of the webinar, you're going to be, Ruth might have to figure out how we're doing it now, but we put a packet that we sent that will be sent to you, and in the packet you'll have the free response question we're using. You'll have this handout, test prep reflection, what Robin actually uses in class. You'll have all the things we're showing on the screen, the student solutions you'll have, along with the commentary. So
Okay.
all this stuff, you don't have to be writing this stuff down. You're actually all going to get it in a packet. So
right. And I see in the directions there's part of a sentence missing, but it's on the handout, so it's not that important. So they come back into class the next day after you've given this as part of your homework. I walk around at the beginning of the period just to check in that they've done the problem. Okay, so that was the urban and rural calories. And by the way, that is one of my favorite problems to use with kids, and a lot of it is because of Part A, which I'll explain in a little while. And so now you create these solution packets, and we'll show you those will be coming up in the next slide. So what I've done is I've gone on to the College Board website, and I've printed out the student solutions, the actual solutions that they use, or sometimes at the reading, we actually get our packet of all the student solutions, so you can pull them from there. And we're allowed to use them from College Board because it is for student training, student instruction, so you can use them. And what I do is I shrink them down, the solutions, so they fit on one side of a page, and you'll have 3 solutions, so solution A, B, C. I staple it together in a little pack. And in a group of 4, I hand out 2. In a group of 3, I'll hand out 2. I want them to work together so they each don't get one. I want them to talk with each other. And they don't write on them because I use them over and over again. So once you start doing this, you'll have a nice collection of these to use year after year with your students. So you hand them out, and again, then the next thing they have to do is they need to score sample A, B, and C. So kind of by themselves, look at the 3 samples, and they're going to score them either 4, 3, 2, or 1. And again, it should be pretty clear to most of them which is the best of the 3, which is the worst of the 3, and then there's something in the middle. Now, when I do this for the first time in the school year, I will give them sample A will be a 4, sample B will be a 3, sample C will be a 2, and I'm going to kind of work through with them. But then subsequent times, sample A is not always the 4. I might do it 3, 4, 2. I might do it 2, 3, 4. And sometimes there might not be a 2. It might be 4, 3, 1 or 1. So you kind of mix it up, because if you always do 4, 3, 2, they're going to catch on to that, and they're just going to say, it's 4, 3, 2. So, I mix them up. So they score it just like, you'll do. And then in their groups, they discuss, and do they agree, why or why not, and maybe take some notes on why they agree on something. They're welcome to change their score if someone in the group has convinced them that maybe they should have changed what they did. All right, so this is what the solutions look like. And again, I shrink them down so they fit. I don't know if you can see what I've done. I mean, I shrink it down, but you'll get it in the packet so that the 2 parts are on one side. So what we'd like you to do is you're going to score paper A, and then we're going to do a poll to see. And that's kind of how I would do it in class, because when they're done with parts 1 and 2, and what I mean with parts 1 and 2, let me go back a second. When they're done with 1 and 2 is when I would say to them, okay, let's look at sample A. Raise your hands if you thought it was a 4. Okay, raise your hands if you thought it was a 3. So that way you're getting a little barometer of what's going on in class, and then you have the discussion with them. And there will be some lively discussions.
And if this is the first time that you're doing this, you talk about the general idea of a 4, 3, 2, 1, correct?
Yeah.
And how that, so you kind of have that little general discussion with them about how they're scoring.
Yes, exactly.
Do you talk about the EPIs at all?
I do talk about the EPIs because in the class quiz we do an EPI. Yes, we do talk about EPIs pretty early on. Usually in the first chapters when I talk about the EPIs, and when they do that class quiz, we also grade it on the board as EPI. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone, we'd like you to look at Part A and jot down whether you think this is essentially correct, partially correct, or incorrect.
So remember, this is our first sample, and they're writing sentences to compare. So the distribution of the daily caloric intake of 9th grade students in the rural high school is approximately symmetric, while the distribution of the daily caloric intake of 9th grade students in the urban high school is skewed right. Neither distributions have an outlier. The median 32 of the urban distribution and its Q1 21 and Q3 36 are all less than that of the rural distribution. Arrow, which has a median of 41, Q1 equal to 35.5, and Q3 equal to 45. The rural distribution has a spread of 19, larger than the urban distribution spread of 16. The IQR of the urban distribution is 5, which is less than the IQR of the rural distribution, which is 10. So EPI.
Okay, you have a few more seconds. We've got lots to do, so. Okay, I'm moving on. Oh, I keep forgetting I can't do it that way. Okay. Stacey, you ready to do Part B?
Yep. So Part B, is it reasonable to generalize to all rural and urban? No, there are many different rural and urban areas in the United States. This sample only encompasses students from 2 schools. There are many more students who don't go to high school, or many schools may even administer healthier lunches. There are just too many confounding or lurking variables to generalize the findings of this study to all rural and urban 9th grade students in the United States. So would you give this an E, P, or I?
And just a reminder, E is essentially correct, P is partially correct, I is incorrect. And another reminder, depending if you've been an AP reader or not, sometimes students write a lot of extra stuff called extraneous information. If the extraneous information is kind of benign, we ignore it. But if they contradict themselves or they have a parallel solution, you grade the weaker one. And so that's what you have to look at too. That's not the case here, but I was just mentioning that. Okay, I'm moving on. Part C.
Okay, Part C, they're supposed to pick which plan better meets the goal of the study. Plan 2 would be better because it encompasses a 7-day period, which would average out any days that a student might have eaten an extreme large amount or a very small amount. In Plan 1, the amount of food is only during one day, and in that one day, there might be variables which cause that person to eat more or less than they normally would. So that gets scored an E, P, or I.
Okay, Ruth, are you ready to run the poll? Let me just say that in this case, 3 E's would be a 4, 2 E's and a P would be a 3, 2 E's and an I, 3 P's would be a 2. Now PPP, back in the old days, that was 1.5. That could go up or down. Now all PPPs are 2. Casey, what did Ruth just say about the chat? In the chat.
We will use a poll to get your scores. Don't use the chat to send your scores.
Okay.
while she's setting the poll up, there was a question, to be clear in understanding, this is based on 2005 information the students are to take into consideration. Would this question be graded differently this now versus 2005?
I don't think this particular question would be graded differently.
Okay. I think it might be referring to the commentary when I was reading. It doesn't talk about EPs and Is. Back then they didn't write that in the commentary. So
yes, in the commentaries now in recent years, the EPIs are in there. And I mean, I was on a question team these last couple of years and we had to really write these out very, very specific. So if you're looking at questions from more recent times, you will see the EPIs with the errors discussed very, very, at length. So this is an old question. On the old questions, you won't see that as much. You won't see them at all, but some of the older questions are actually better to use depending if you just want to hit one specific topic.
All right, let's see what our poll results say. Ruth, reveal. I'm excited.
Bruce, are we oh, here we go.
Hang on.
All right. Okay, no one sees the poll.
Here's the poll. The poll is coming.
Okay. Thank you.
There we go. I see it.
Right.
I was thinking maybe I wouldn't see it this time. Yep, I see it.
Okay.
So what do you score this question with the 3 parts using your EP and I combination?
Remember, the kids don't have a rubric. They don't see the rubric. We're not giving them a rubric. We don't care about the rubric. This is going to go much quicker in class, going over, because they're just going to score it. They've learned about EPI. And then once it's all scored, we'll discuss it. So it will be much quicker in class.
Yeah, and this part, I think, it'll be their gut of what they're going to say.
Right.
That's what they get a feel for.
Okay, 5 seconds left. We're closing the poll. All right.
Okay. So we should, I think we'll all get the results. There we go. We've got some few 2s, some 3s, and some 4s. The most we have is 3s.
We have, okay. So I would definitely, I would ask kids, the question did get, this one got a 4. And so I would ask students who raise their hand with 2 or with 3 what they saw at that point that put it down to a 3 or a 2. I will tell you on this question, they had a minor error with the IQR for urban is 7 rather than 5, and quartile 1 for rural is incorrect. But the commentary here says that the specific values were not required in this problem, and they were not penalized. They were not asked to put specific values, so they were not penalized for incorrect values. So if you gave it a 3 for that reason, it was not given a 3. And the part A that I'm going to come back to on the comparison is where students are losing credit these days is they don't compare. So what many students do is they would list the all the things about urban. They'd list the mean for urban, they'd list the median for urban, they'd list the range for urban, and they would do the same thing for rural, never comparing, and they get an incomplete there, okay? They would totally get an incomplete because they never compared. So I really try to work on comparing with kids and talking about the words with compare, like more than, less than. In fact, they don't even have to say the mean of 50 is greater than the mean of 30. They could just say the mean of urban was greater than the mean of rural, or whatever it is. They don't have to use any numbers in these cases whatsoever, as long as they use a comparison statement.
Now,
Okay.
on this question, if there's a question in the chat, if they mention that there are no outliers, do they have to prove that?
That would be it's going to be extraneous at this point, I think, because they've answered it quite well, and I doubt there'd be any deduction there. It's just extraneous. If the question was asking them, are there outliers, then they have to show the math involved and explain why. There's another AP question in recent years, a question 1, where which is another good teaching problem, where they were looking at entry-level salaries in 2 corporations, A and B. I don't remember whether the problem was like 2015, 16, 17, somewhere in there. And they did have to, if they had to, there was one of the companies had high-end ones with outliers, so it was a little bit different because it was clear there were outliers there.
I usually tell my students, say, there doesn't appear to be outliers.
Right.
There appears to possibly be outliers. That way they're not declaring it, you know.
Right.
But
Tracy, someone just popped something in the chat about something they learned today. Can you read that? Because I saw it and I thought it was important.
I learned today during a speakers panelist discussion with NASEM that students are failing with questions such as this due to misconceptions. When students reached out to professor to discuss further, the understanding and outcome was far much better in answer and delivery.
Yeah, so definitely work on these types of things with what comparison really is. It's not a laundry list of stuff that you're giving them.
And I'll tell you, I can attest, I just graded some problems that they turned into me, comparison, and I know I talked about comparison words. About half the class used them, the other half didn't. So.
and you cannot be nice. It's tough love. You got to mark them wrong. And the reason why I go with the tough love is you want to set this standard early and don't give them credit. They've got to learn that they need to really pay attention.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Can we take the poll? There we go. All right. Let's move on to, this is example B.
Okay. Right? So this is the second student who's attempting at this problem. And so their comparison, they say the urban sample distribution has a center of approximately 33 and is skewed towards lower caloric intakes, a spread of 26 to 42 with no outliers. The rural sample distribution is roughly symmetric around a center of 41 calories per kilogram at body weight, a spread of 32 to 51 with no outliers. So think about an EPI for that one.
And then I will move on. Okay, I'm going to move on. This should be pretty easy.
Okay, part B. It is not reasonable to generalize these findings to all rural and urban 9th grade students because the sample size is so small and only includes 2 schools. These 2 schools could have very different meal plans provided during the school day than the average plans of high schools in the nation. Only using 2 schools leaves room for confounding variables. So let's score that an E, P, or I.
Okay, moving on. I hope you have read that.
Plan 2, it would give a more realistic view of the student's daily caloric intake by averaging over a 7-day period. This would help reduce the impact of unusually high or low days, such as a party or a day in which a meal was missed. These averages would more realistically represent each student. So is that an E, P, or I?
Okay, Ruth, we'll have the poll come, please.
Start the poll. Yay! I didn't cue her last time. That was my fault.
Okay.
So
Okay,
putting
one demerit for Tracy. And then you're going to score when the poll comes up.
And I do see the poll. If you're not seeing the poll, look for polling over by the chat or Q&A. 1 P and 2 E's. That would be a 3.
Okay, I don't see the poll this time, so that's interesting. I was so excited to see the poll last time. Oh, well.
I'm not going to vote. Yeah, about 4 seconds. Okay, the poll has ended.
All right, what do we got?
Let's see our results. How do we feel about this student paper?
Oh, I see the poll.
Okay, we don't have any 4s.
Good, good.
Problems, great.
Right.
There are the most 3s. 28% of us said it was a 3. 13% of us said it was a 2, and 5% says it was a 1.
Okay, this was scored a 2. I think that a lot of people put 3s because there is clearly stuff wrong in Part A. They never used any kind of comparison. And because only one of the 3 characteristics was compared, they didn't use, comparison for center and spread. 1 out of 3 gets them an I, not a P. So I think maybe that's why some of you scored it a 3 and not a 2. So there's 3 parts to that. They had to have all 3 parts done correctly for the E, 2 of the 3 for a P, and because only 1 of the 3 was done, that's why it was an I. So I'm just going to guess that's why some of you had it scored as a 3. In Part B, the first paragraph mentions the sample size is too small and only includes two schools. It's not clear if the sample size refers to students or schools. However, the next couple of sentences clarified it, and it says the 2 schools have been correctly recognized as a sampling unit with too small of a sample size. So they kind of recovered there. So that was fine. And then in Part C, they've got, where am I? Part C, there's no reference to whether the sampling unit is the number of schools or the number of students. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Part B.
Part B.
I'm reading the wrong one. Hey, hang on. It's been a long day. Okay, and Part C, the justification of day-to-day variability is indicated by discussing the impact of unusually high or low days. So that was fine. So Part A gets an I, and Parts B and C get an E, so EEI is a 2. All right. I know some of you are grumbling out there.
I'm grumbling a little bit they didn't get anything for the first one. I need to be harder on my students.
You do. Tough love is the phrase today. All right, we need to go quickly. Let's take the poll away and go to part C, question C.
Okay. Students in rural high school has higher median and range compared to students in urban high school. Almost half of the data from urban school is in the 20s, but the data of rural is well distributed. Shape of the distribution from urban is skewed to the right, and shape of the distribution from rural is nearly symmetric. There is no gap in either school. So think about E, P, and I for that part.
Okay, we're moving on.
It is not reasonable to generalize the finding of this study because the sample size is small and there could be some confounding variables that controls the calories of students in each area. Score that an EP or I.
And I also emphasize to my students that sometimes they think they need to write a lot. And when they write too much, sometimes they shoot themselves in the foot. So, you know, I think they can do a better job of writing with less. And many times when I'm correcting exams and I give them back, if I see extraneous information, I take my purple pen, purple because we're Washington Huskies out here and we like purple. I take my purple pen and I put strike-throughs in extraneous information so they learn that, oh, I really didn't need to have that. So extraneous that doesn't hurt them, I will just put a line through it so they learn that. And here's part C.
Plan 2 would better meet the goal of the study because the study is trying to find out the general idea of difference in consumption of calories of adolescents between urban and rural area. If researchers study a week period of food he or she consumes, the data would be more reliable. If researchers only study one day of the food, they can't get the general idea of the number of calories. So score that part at EPI, and then put your 3 together. So Ruth can start the new poll for our last student paper. What are they going to get?
Okay, so I think we're ready for the poll whenever.
It started.
Oh, it did start. Okay.
Yep.
Again, I feel so left out that I can't see it. Sharing my screen.
Got 30 seconds left. And there is a link in the chat, if you notice, that Ruth put to our document, our handout we put together that has all this put in it.
I don't know if my email is in there. Email
5
address.
seconds. I don't think mine is too, actually. I think we didn't put our emails in.
Well, we can put them in the chat before we go.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's see our poll results. All right, we have a couple of 4s, 23% 3s, 13% 2s, and 12% 1s. Really varying on this one.
Yep. And I will say that, you know, kids will get very frustrated with this because they're not AP readers, they're not trained. They get frustrated, but it's going to really have some good conversations. So this was scored a 1. Yes, a 1. All right, the response is minimal but complete. Part A, the first sentence states students in rural high school, higher median and range compared to urban. The sentence nicely emphasizes immediately the comparison of center and spread, and then shape is given in the last sentence. So this was pretty straightforward. This is scored an E. In part B, it's an E, right, part A. Part B, they say the sample size is small. There's no reference to whether the sampling unit is the number of schools or the number of students. The comment on confounding variables is extraneous. The student does not adequately answer the question. This is an I. And C, Plan 2 is selected that a week period of food he or she consumes, the data would be more reliable, giving a hint to the variability, but it's a weak justification for saying more days. They got an I. So it's an EII1. Yes, it's a 1.
Wow.
Yep. All right, and let me take that away. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so I need to move that. There. All right, so here's the meat of this whole thing now. This is part 3, 4, and 5 of the test prep reflection sheet. Now you give them time to work on this. Again, going over the scores should take 5 minutes. We purposely did it a lot longer because I'm kind of teaching you how to do this, but that should be the quickest part of this. 3, 4, and 5, they're going to spend time really writing on this, and I collect it and I grade it out of 5 points, 5-point assignment. And if they don't finish it in the time you've allotted in class, I let them take it home and bring it back the next day. So in part 3, what made the best response different from the worst? So they have to be really specific, looking at the best one and the worst one, and be specific in the context of the situation what made A better than C? Okay, not just that, oh, it had the right answer, but what was it that A did? Okay, I mean, it's not part A because they both did the comparisons very nicely. So they're going to, in this part, you should be seeing something related to parts B and C. Number 4, how would you rate your response after looking at the student samples? Remember, they don't see a rubric. So they know which one's the 4, and in many AP problems, there's just different ways to get 4s, but they should be able to take their response and compare it to the 4. And most of my students, after a while, they're very honest about their score because they know I'm not grading them on their score. And again, they have to be specific, like, I forgot to use comparison words like more than and less than in part A. Maybe that's the reason why they got a 3. So again, very specific. And then part 5, and this is answering the gentleman's question that I asked earlier about the rubric. If you were asked to develop a scoring rubric for the problem, what would the perfect response have to contain? What components? Now, we don't expect students to write a perfect rubric. I couldn't even write a perfect rubric. We're just looking for them to list the important things you talked about. So in part A, they need to use comparison words like more than, less than, when comparing and describing the distributions. In part B, they need to, whatever. So they need to look at what it is that is important in each of the different parts to make the rubric. And that's where kids stumble. They will stumble early in this. So questions 3, 4, and 5 are the important things you're looking at. The first couple of times they do it, they are going to stumble on 3, 4, and 5. But, it's a great learning experience for them. It's okay to be a little tough on them. I'd rather be tough on them now, and then maybe they'll do better on the AP test. But my students have, year after year, say that this has really helped them. And I know when I've given them AP questions on their regular chapter test and AP questions to practice review before the exam, I could see the improvement all through the year because I used AP questions on all my tests. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing, Tracy, so I can see some stuff in the question was, do I ever show them the rubric? Yeah. No. I don't show them the rubric.
That surprised me when Robin told me that. I was like, really? But if you think about it, I mean, like she said, I can't write a perfect rubric. They're going to come up with the key things that the rubric encompasses, by looking at different student samples. I mean, right. I think this is wonderful. Because we don't need them to be E's on everything. I always tell my kids, right. You can have some P's, you can fall down in some spots, but they're right. going to see a lot of right. elements that will be in E's.
And Joseph, you said you really love it. Thank you so much. I mean, I've worked hard for years refining this, and when I teach the summer AP workshops for teachers, we spend quite a bit of time on it, and I really frustrate people because the problem that I use is a conditional probability one, which is everybody's favorite, not, and we do it on the day that we've done conditional probability, so it's a real stretch for people, but, then I offer a glass of wine later, so it kind of fits everybody.
Dan, on the handout that we put together on the very first page, I put a short URL that gets you directly to the AP Statistics exam page. That's where you can find the old exams, the student samples, and the commentaries for every test that they've got out there.
Right. So, I just put my email address in the chat. Tracy will put hers. If you have any questions when you do this with your kids, I know this year could be a little more challenging. I saw someone in the chat had something earlier where you only have 9 or 12 students, and so maybe you just put them in groups of 2. Yeah. But I think if you're using Zoom or something that you could do breakout rooms with them. Mm-hmm. And again, I recommend, like I've done it. I've done it right from the first chapter, right at the beginning of the year. I know some of you are past that at this point, and I walk them through the first one. Okay, Ruth just said, someone wondered, what conditional probability question did I use? It's the one on ELISA test, ELISA. there's a question out there on, it's a conditional probability about false positives and negatives. I honestly don't remember what year it was. I would have to look if someone wants to email me. But it's the one that's on the ELISA test. I'm going to say 2009, somewhere in there. That's the conditional probability question that I use in my teacher workshops to teach them how to do this. It's a very hard question. Students get a little flummoxed by it as well. Elisa, okay, thank you. And so it's a good question, but it's tough. But it's okay to do tough.
Yeah, someone asked about the 2020 questions. I think you have to have a course audit to go in and see them. So they're not going to be releasing in the 2020 questions. And even I can see them, but I have to only use them in my classroom because they're going to keep them as secure questions. They're never going to be actually open to the public this past year.
And just a couple of comments on that conditional probability one. Yes, it is a tough problem. It is long. I don't necessarily always use that with kids. It depends on the class. And also, I don't necessarily use the same test prep problems each year on chapter. It depends on how my class is doing and where I see some of their deficits. So that's why I keep a bunch of different ones handy. And I'm going to give them a problem that I think will help them the most to learn.
All right. I think we need to send it back to Ruth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy and Robin. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I put a link in the chat, and we also have that slide. That's where you can go to download a certificate of attendance for tonight's webinar. We encourage you to keep in touch, stay connected. These slides will also be available in the document, so if there are links that you've missed in the chat or throughout tonight, you can have them. Also, you'll get an email with the link to the documents that Robin and Tracy have prepared for us tonight, and with the link to the certificate of attendance. After you leave the webinar, there'll be a post-webinar follow-up. Be appreciated if you could answer those questions if you get a survey, and keep in touch there. And let's see what else. Yes, there's that survey. However you registered for this one, you have an opportunity to register for upcoming ones as well. We'll keep the chat open a little bit longer. If you have some questions for Tracy and Robin, you have the option to save the chat. Under when you're leaving this, it'll ask if you want to save the chat in case you miss some comments or some link or Robin and Tracy's email addresses. So you can save that chat so that you can look at it a bit later. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Tracy and Robin.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Night.